wook+live.
Yo, welcome back to wook+live. What's up, guys?
Does anybody else dance?
Yeah, the whole time, man. Backstage,
You can't not.
Oh man, Jason writes some catchy motherfucking songs,
Yeah.
dude.
Hey, before we start, can I send a shout out to Ryan and Katie for every time I ask them, they retweet stuff for me. They are just both on it, and
That's
love
the
you
way
for
to
that.
Kevin's heart. If you want to become his
is.
best friend, just retweet his shit
Just
and
retweet me.
he'll love you.
Otherwise, he'll lecture
depth
you
of
and
relationship there.
and guilt trip you and lecture you if you don't. So
Right.
Right,
all
then bringing it back to the Wook thread. What the fuck, guys?
So did either of you get to watch any Goose Trey?
Not yet, which I'm kind of excited about. I had a really busy week, but I'm planning on going to see him this weekend in Reading, and I'm kind of excited. I've seen the commentary on Twitter. It's almost like you can't avoid it, but I haven't actually caught it, so I'm going in with no expectations and a kind of clean palette with it.
Been having fun. Last night, James Casey was not with them. We know he's going through chemo. Kenneth Wallum stepped in, which I think is the guy who replaced him last fall. The guy was fantastic. But yeah, we're gonna have such a good time. I'm gonna be in Reading with you, so we're gonna have a fantastic time. And from what I've heard, Goose has really stepped into being an arena band. It's like every time they take the bigger stage, they step it up 3 times. I really am more impressed every time I see them when they are making these quick moves.
Yeah, no, it's and I'm happy for the fans and I'm happy for the band, right? Like I don't understand. There's always some sort of gatekeeping or negativity that comes when a band or somebody becomes more successful, and I'm glad. I just want to put up positive energy for that, right? Like I don't want to hyperanalyze it, but I agree. I think that they're really filling those venues, and I'm excited to see them. This whole show is just dedicated to Ryan right now.
It is. We're going to bring Mark in a second because I know everybody's here to see that and not listen to us.
They're here to us talk about Goose.
Lam and I have been doing a record club. Go over to the blog, check it out. I made him listen to Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. He made me listen to Neutral Milk Hotel.
You guys are going to do that with Skoy too, right?
Yes, we're adding Skoy next month, and my album.
Skoy just going to be putting like death metal and like heavy metal albums on the whole time.
I'm not sure. He gave us the name of the album, but I have not heard of the person, so I'm going to go in with an open mind. Whatever it is, I don't even know what genre. Llama gave me the Strokes for next time, and I gave them Yes 90125.
Nice.
902. Yeah. I don't want to call it the TV show, but without further ado, let's bring in Mark Karan.
Hey, Mark, how's it going?
Good. How you guys doing?
Good.
good.
Really appreciate you coming on the show. We've already had such a fun conversation backstage and in the green room before the show that I'm really excited to talk to you.
But I can't think of anything to say now.
We know everything.
It's the recreating of a jam all over again.
It is.
No, Kev, why don't you take it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess reading up, we do our research here. I saw that like in the late 80s, early 90s, you played with Paul Carrick from Squeeze, Huey Lewis, Dave Mason from Traffic, Sophie B. Hawkins. Why don't we start there with how did you end up getting into that kind of circuit as a sideman?
It just kind of developed that way. I was playing a lot in Marin County, kind of local guitar hero or whatever the hell you want to call it, working with everybody and their brother. Sometimes my own bands, but more often than not, I'd wind up being a guitar player in a band that was based on somebody else's singing and songwriting. And so I developed a lot of comfort in fitting into a lot of different musical styles. And I've always had really eclectic tastes. So my whole career just kind of moved in that direction more than getting locked into one solid band. And at a certain point, the Bay Area scene kind of had dried up. I actually, some of the things you mentioned, I actually got when I was still in the Bay Area. The Paul Carrick tour was my first real tour. And I got that while I was still living in the Bay. But in 91, the Bay had kind of dried up. A lot of the clubs were going to DJs. The session scene had kind of dried up because everybody's getting home studios and doing it all themselves. And I said, well, I've been terrified to go to LA thinking I'd just get lost in the shuffle. But that's where the tours are. That's where the records are being made. I want to go there. So I moved down there in 91. And like you say, I mean, it took me a few years to kind of get plugged in, and going to jams and playing with small local situations and whatnot. But I wound up meeting a whole bunch of really, really cool musicians. And through those connections, I got connected to, like Delaney Bramlett. I played with Delaney for the last 10 years of his life. And Dave Mason was my first gig when I moved down there. Billy Goodman, that used to play with Kimmock and the Goodman Brothers back in the day. He'd been Dave's guitar player and he was quitting. So he knew I was planning on moving to LA, and that's where that was all located. And he was like, dude, I got you this gig.
That's fantastic. I saw Dave Mason maybe 92, 93 when I lived in Fort Collins.
Oh, that would have been right after me. Yeah. Yeah.
So
is it safe to assume that you have to be, to some extent, a fan of the artist you're playing with?
No.
I was like, are there artists you play with that their music is not your particular taste?
You're going to
have you're professional, so you
on sessions, yeah. Live, not as much. I think it's harder to be authentic live, and also it's a deeper connection. It's one thing to put on kind of a different hat or a different mask and go have fun with it for a day or even a week or so in the
like
studio
a session or something.
It's like, oh, this is interesting. Let me see what it'd be like to dress up as that for a minute.
Right.
But if you're out on tour or working with a band, you kind of need to be committed on some level. Like I'm doing this Gilmore Project thing now, which has been a nice switch for me because I've been doing the Dead thing, pretty much a steady diet of it for a really long time now.
Really long. Yeah.
And I love it, but I've always been eclectic. I like a broad spectrum of shit, so, and I never really got into Floyd. And I certainly never got into Gilmore's solo work. So this has been a cool ride for me because I'm able to, explore. And so now I'm on stage kind of going, okay, yeah, I can make a commitment to this Floyd stuff. It's pretty fucking cool.
So you do stuff off of what, About Face and his first solo album?
I can't even tell you where a lot of it's sourced. The guy whose concept it is, this guy, Michael Gaiman. He's the guy that came up with Jazz is Dead and Blue Floyd, and he's kind of a concept guy,
Right. Blue Floyd with the Government Mule. Blue Floyd had the Government Mule bassist, right?
Woody, yeah. Only he played guitar in Blue Floyd.
Right.
Yeah. And so Michael just came up with this idea to do Floyd, but not, there's a lot of really great high-end Floyd cover bands like UK Floyd and all that are killing it if you want note for note. So he was like, let's don't do note for note. Let's be an interpretive Floyd cover band. We're doing the songs, and some of the key elements will be there. The other guitar player is taking the time to work out the solos and the sounds kind of spot on. And so I'm lucky. I don't have to do that. I'm just allowed to be me in that context.
Have you heard Nick Mason's Saucer Full of Secrets?
I haven't, but I've been hearing it's really, really good.
I've heard some tapes of it. Fantastic. They do everything pre-obscured by clouds. So you don't get any of the hits, so to speak, that you'll get with like those other voids.
Is it all Sid then?
No, well, it's like stuff from Amagama and stuff from Adam Hart Mother and what else is in there? Moore. They do Nile song from Moore, that punk rock sounding thing.
I think that's earlier than anything that we're off into. Also, this past year anyway, one of the sets for the whole run has always been Dark Side in its entirety because it's 50th anniversary of the live appearance of Dark Star.
Okay, right.
I mean, not Dark Star, but Dark Side.
Dark Side, yeah.
Right. That
get these bands confused,
There's a famous bootleg. There's a famous bootleg from '72 from Japan. That's, I think, one of the first times they did the whole Dark Side.
It was something or other for Lunatics or something like that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Famous bootleg record. Records were these things, Tim, that you played.
Yeah, I got you.
They're like frisbees.
Hey man, hipsters brought vinyl back. I'm cool. I get it. I got it. Llama has a whole vinyl collection now.
Yeah, but it's $30 a record now. I remember $2.99 at Tower.
Mark, so which would you prefer to play? Like if you had to choose, all other circumstances non-factoring, right? Just out of pure love and enjoyment of it. be on stage doing a Dark Side or a Dark Star?
Oh God, neither. Probably from a pure freedom standpoint, I love doing Dark Star because all bets are off, you know. But you know, my real deep love, and one of the reasons that I can connect to the Grateful Dead, apart from my, you know, my childhood history with the band, which is deep too, but is because everything that they did on some level was sourced in Americana. So, you know, if you love folk music, if you love hardcore country, if you love real blues, if you love early rock and roll, well, the Grateful Dead is kind of your band because they take all of those elements and smush it into their own particular oddball stew, you know? And so for me, I love that because I can kind of access all of my various influences and stuff. But really, when I'm doing my own thing, like when I had Jemima Puddle Duck, and I'm regathering up some version of Mark Karan's Buds again now, and what that essentially is, I like to think of it as like the actual song part of what I'm up to is kind of cut from similar cloth to Ry Cooder, Bonnie Raitt, David Lindley, Taj Mahal, those kinds of artists. The only difference is that when we get to the instrumental bits, I still like to take things for a walk in the woods, you know, so it might sound pretty tight and pretty together while the song itself is happening, still improvised, but tight and together.
Right.
But once we get to the instrumental bits, all bets are off. We don't know what's going to happen.
And you like that, right? Like
I
feel like
I really, I
like an adrenaline to that, or a certain energy.
Well, it's pure creativity at that point when all bets are literally off, and you actually really don't have any idea what's next. As long as you're staying away from something that I think is death to jams, to at least to deep jams, which is noodling. You know, if you're on
noodling in the pentatonic will fuck your jam up.
You know, it's just like, dude, I'm so bored listening to you just play whatever's, you know, whatever your fingers want to do. Put your heart and your brain into it.
Find it. It's somewhere there. You just have to uncover it. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
I think that's a common falling point for younger jam bands, right? Because they just pull out the memories of, oh, this band, that band noodled, and they think that's all you have to do, and they lose the underwriting, you know, vehicle that you need to establish and go for.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I'm going to say something that will likely get me some hate mail.
This is the place to do it.
Yeah.
Controversy. Yeah.
But the truth is, in my opinion, anyway, one of the sad things that's happened with the proliferation of all the Grateful Dead cover bands that are just exploding all over the country, and especially here in the Bay Area, is that a lot of people misinterpret, to me anyway, the fact that the Dead were always willing and able to go out on a limb. And that meant that periodically they were going to shit the bed because they didn't know where they were going. And sometimes when you don't know where you're going, you don't get there. You know,
you have to be willing to take that risk to go out on that limb.
Yeah. But I always loved that and respected that because they were so willing to take a chance and sound like shit if that's where it led them. Because if it didn't lead them there, it could lead them to absolutely strike gold, you know. But what I see in a lot of the Dead cover bands, and not all of them for sure, there's some amazing Dead cover bands out there. But in a lot of the bands, I see kind of almost a sense of we don't have to be very good. The Dead made a lot of mistakes, that you know, so we don't really have to be very good musicians.
Right.
I don't think that's it at all. The Dead were amazing musicians that were willing to make mistakes, not making mistakes and sounding bad because they couldn't do any better.
All right. What do you think? What do you make of J-Rad? Have you heard them?
Very little. It's not my taste, but I like it. I respect it because they're doing something a little different with the material. You know, it's a little aggressive for my tastes on that material. You know, my favorite era for the Dead is probably 68 to 76. You know, after I didn't really get much of the 80s Dead. I had already moved on to other musics by then. My ex-wife was a total 80s Dead gal because that's when she started listening. But, you know, my first Dead show, I was 11 years old. It was 1966. And, you know, my last Dead show was probably in 75 or 76.
Wow.
So I was seeing all those great shows at the Fillmore and in the Golden Gate Park days and Winterland and Fillmore West. And, you know, I saw a ton of that.
What year did you first hook up with Bobby? Was Bobby the first one that you hooked up with?
Yeah, and that in and of itself is kind of an oddball, interesting story because, you know, having lived in San Francisco all my life, I never met any of those guys. I went to lots of shows, but I want
to hear the year first, though. I want to hear the story because I'm sure it's fascinating. But I love you laid out a timeline here, right, of what years you're listening to Dead, when you kind of fell off of it. Now bring us to what year is it when you first interacted with Bobby?
That's what I was going to say. It's very weird because I had to move to Los Angeles. I'd lived in San Francisco all my life. I had to move to LA and meet John Molo playing down there. You know, we'd bump into each other on sessions and at gigs and stuff. So when the guys got together and decided they wanted to re-put the big band together after Jerry had died in '98, they called John and they said, "Hey, John, you know, you play with Brucey and you're going to be playing with this thing we're putting together. We don't know any guitar players. We've had Jerry, so we don't know anybody else. You know,
right.
We don't know who we'd want. You live in LA. There's tons of guitar players down there. Who would you recommend?" And so back in '98, he gave him a list of, I think, 3 names of people down there. Myself and Tony Gilkison from X and a friend of ours, Lauren Ellis, who was actually a female who plays really ripping slide guitar. Wow. And the 3 of us tried out and Kimmock tried out. And I think there may have been 1 or 2 others. And out of all that, I wound up getting the spot. And then Phil decided he actually really thought Kimmock should maybe get the spot after all. And so in classic Grateful Dead fashion, that was an argument for several days that actually wound up with no consensus. And so they said, fuck it, take them both.
So you ended up with the 3 guitar attack there.
Yeah, we had Bobby and me and Steve.
No, was that playing with Kimmock? Is that I guess that's a different beast altogether, huh?
Well, he's just so brilliant. I mean, you know, there's a lot of good guitar players on the planet. You know, I'm an okay guitar player. I don't like to sell myself super short.
Big understatement, but
I would not compare myself to Kimmock. Kimmock is a guitarist or a musician's musician. I consider myself a musical person and an entertainer, and guitar and my voice is just kind of my medium. But I don't really think in terms of like I'm breaking new ground. I'm gonna show the world a new way to approach guitar. That's not me, you know. But Steve can actually do that. Steve's a deep motherfucker, man.
Wow. Yeah, it's wild.
I saw a few of those Camden, I guess in '98 I was at for the other ones there.
Sure.
The only time really that new songs were introduced to the Grateful Dead catalog was Strange Remain and Baba Jingo and all that. Mm-hmm. Was there a discussion that we want to do this, or did those songs just show up and, hey, we're going to throw these in?
Those both, I'm pretty sure, came pretty much directly from Mickey, as I recall. Just like his approach to Fire on the Mountain with the kind of the rap approach, right? You know. Those were directly from him, and I think it was just a matter of, well, we're reforming this band, and I want a voice. I want some say in what's going on, and everybody was kind of in a place where, well, Jerry's not here anymore. What do we do? You know, I mean, the guiding force, Papa, ain't around. You know, right. and none of us are necessarily stepping directly into the role of band leader. So everybody express yourselves. You know.
So who wrote the set list?
That's a good question. You know, I was never involved in that process. I know with Ratdog, it was absolutely weird. And he had, if you guys are interested, I can hip you to his methodology, because there's definitely a method to that madness.
I love set list talk. It's my favorite thing to talk about.
But honestly, in the other ones, I would wager that Bob or Phil or the 2 of them together probably came up with something and then presented it to Bruce and Mickey and said, what do you guys think? And I'm pretty sure it's probably just the 4 of them that were really instrumental in picking the actual songs.
From when we talked to Matt Bush, he writes the set list for Bobby now. I guess Bobby has handed that off.
Oh, wow. Well, you know what? That thing I was just saying about the methodology, that actually makes sense because Bob would have an Excel sheet or a series of Excel sheets. And one of them would be all the tempos of the songs. And one of them would be all the keys of the songs.
Oh, for transitions, for segues, determining.
Yeah. And then one would be what did we play last year when we were here? And then one would be what have we played in the last 3 nights?
Last 3 times played, right?
Yeah. So it's like, okay, well, nothing in the last 3 nights.
Right.
Nothing that we played last time we were here. So let's get rid of all
the one-timer fans, the fans that aren't going to travel like too far, but they come to that venue each year.
Right, exactly.
They don't, it's cool. It's so considerate of different groups of people. Like that's really what I take out of that is a consideration, like putting himself in the fan's position and what the fan cares about. That's why he's doing that, right? It's for people that are on the run.
That in a sense of tradition, I mean, the fans have come to expect that, but so have the musicians. I mean, that was really new for me, getting up on stage at every single show, doing something that you hadn't done.
How many?
You had a set that you worked up. You had 200 songs that you worked up, and then a grab bag.
I was going to ask, how many songs at a given time did you have to have ready to go? You think it was probably around 200?
Probably. I mean, it didn't start out that way, but Ratdog, I did Ratdog pretty solid for 14 years.
Yeah.
So after that long of doing it, you develop a pretty good catalog.
Right, but I imagine, I don't know, I've never been at that level of performance, but like I've played music and jammed. I imagine that at some point, once you get past like, I don't know, 40, 50 songs, there is a rust to them, right? If you haven't pulled them out in a while.
Oh, yeah. And so I think similarly to the Grateful Dead, there would be some version of a whittling down or narrowing down of the giant playing field into a manageable playing field that we could work on for this tour.
Right.
So if we hadn't done a song in 100 years, we definitely ran it at whatever rehearsals we might have.
Right, before the tour.
And then there were things like, for a long time, Bob was staying away from Morning Dew and Stella and a few of these songs that were just sort of sacred Jerry songs. He was fine with doing some Jerry stuff, but some of them were like, yeah, maybe it's not time yet, So I remember at a certain point, I think it was pretty late in Ratdog's tenure, like 2009, 10, somewhere in there maybe, we started bringing in Morning Dew and some of that stuff. And so we certainly had to spend some time with that, because you don't want to butcher those songs.
Definitely.
No, definitely not.
Prince Bowie has a question there. Will there ever be a Ratdog reunion?
That's not a question for me. My guess is no, but you never know. I mean, maybe there's some nostalgia hit that wants to happen. To me, what I'm observing now is that Wolf Brothers has kind of become Bob's new current Ratdog.
That's what I was saying earlier.
It's where he can go really be Bobby, as opposed to I'm Bobby from the Grateful Dead. He can go be I'm Bobby Weir.
Right.
With no
Makes sense. Right. I feel like there might be a nostalgic thing though for fans because he has always been I feel like his whole career is so in tune with his fans. I think there's an opportunity for something though because that was a big part of our history, right? Like, and it was not just a patch over a wound for a short period of time. There was a lot of history there. So I don't know, maybe out of some sort of nostalgic reasoning or for the fans.
Right. I certainly wouldn't object.
Right.
Katie wants to know your favorite Robin memory. If everyone doesn't know, Robin passed 3 weeks ago. Has it been 3 weeks now? A month ago?
About 3 weeks. Yeah. That's a tough one. First of all, my brain doesn't think like that. Like people asking me my favorite Grateful Dead song to play or what's your favorite Beatles. I don't know. I know my favorite 20.
I can give you a top 5.
I can kind of do a top 5, but I figured it is hard. The other thing with Robin is that we knew each other for so long. I mean, I got him into Ratdog. I threw his hat into the ring, and he and I had known each other since the late 70s, so I've got a whole bunch of different kinds of memories of Robin. It goes deep. It goes really deep.
That's so cool. So when Wasserman decided he was not going to be playing, and they brought Robin in, I always felt like Robin added a real, like, a more rock and roll flavor to Ratdog than what you got with Wasserman there.
Absolutely.
And he played all the way through to the end with Ratdog.
Yeah.
Very nice. What stopped it? Why did Bobby ever say why, or was it just one? There was no next tour one day.
Well, it kind of was that in a way. I have my theories about what happened. Nothing was ever really discussed, but I think it had a lot to do with Further and wanting to launch another big deal band, and maybe wanting to kind of clear the playing field a little bit, because Phil kind of put Phil and Friends to bed at the same time, and then of course they went to Dark Star and they got Kadlezik,
right?
Which I think the thinking may have been, so they're not going to be around either. But of course they turned around and got Mattson, and for my money, I love Jeff. I mean, Kadlezik's great, but Mattson he's almost magical the way he can channel 70s Jerry. It's insane.
Mm-hmm.
You gonna catch any of the Dead and Company last tour, you think?
Nah. I haven't been. I went and saw Wolf Brothers for Bobby's birthday weekend.
Yeah.
Oh, at Sweetwater. At Sweetwater,
no,
the Warfield?
No, at the Warfield. And I really dug it, actually, because I hadn't actually been to see anything Bobby'd been doing since Ratdog went away. It's a little bit like going to watch your wife with her new husband or something, So I hadn't been, it wasn't like there was a hard feelings or animosity. It was just a little tough, and I'm also obviously trying to move on to whatever's next.
Right.
But I was offered the opportunity to go, and I was like, well, yeah, and it was great because, I got to see kind of from a more fan perspective what it was that folks really dug about Ratdog, because it's Bob's being Bob, pure and simple, and there's a lot of Grateful Dead material being done in that band, but there's a lot of other, he's got his solo album stuff.
Evening Moods is such a fantastic album. It really is. I mean, I love every song on it. I wish those songs showed up more with like Wolf Brothers. I know Ashes and Glass does, I think, sometimes, but a lot of those just fall into the wayside. I guess.
Yeah. Well, there were even a couple of songs on that record that they got really short lifespans, even in Ratdog. He had written a song for Monet when she was first born called "Welcome to the World," and I've always really loved that song, mostly because I knew what it was about. I knew what it was for, and I had such a soft spot in my heart for that gentle part of Bobby coming out in that song. But I guess the song itself didn't have enough. What would you call it? Gravitas or whatever,
right. I hear you with that. So after Ratdog, what happened? Did you just kick around? Did you join? I know that you've been like the Golden Gate Wingmen, but I think that's something.
Never did that. That was Kadlezik.
Oh, right. Okay. So what have you been doing since then? Like the ghost
kind of whatever I can get my grubby little paws on, that guy Gaiman that I told you about that's responsible currently for the Gilmore Project, and he had put together Jazz is Dead and Blue Floyd and all that stuff. He came up with a concept for a band called Live Dead 69 with myself and Tom Constantin from the original Dead lineup, and Slick Aguilar, who had been the guitar player for Jefferson Starship for 20 plus years. And the idea initially anyway, was we were just going to go out and do the Live Dead album in its, just those 6 songs reinterpreted. And it was a package deal with another band that he'd put together called the Airplane Family. Okay. And what happened was the Airplane Family didn't seem to develop a lot of legs. But Live Dead, people actually seemed to like what was going on. So we've been touring on and off with Live Dead for several years now. And I've been doing the Gilmore Project. And then around here in the Bay Area, I haven't been doing, I occasionally get out and do my own band. And I haven't been doing anything regular. But like I was saying earlier, there's umpteen bajillion Grateful Dead cover bands in the Bay Area now. And most
like
of
that
them,
all over the country. I mean,
I
especially concentrated in
know,
the Bay Area, but
I think it's even more
really
here just because the band is centered out of here. There's that thing. But in any case, it's a lot of plug and play. There's there'll be band names, like the Left-Handed Monkey Wrench or the whatever, the various clever Grateful Dead cover names. But it's a lot of the same people in rotation. It's not like, if you're going to go see this band, it's this set of 5 guys. It's one guy whose band it is and who kind of has a handle on using that name, calling various musicians from the Bay Area Grateful Dead scene to come and do a gig. Right. So that's kind of been what I've been doing a lot of when I'm at home, is just plug and play Grateful Dead cover stuff.
And you play with Stu Allen, who does Mars Hotel. Isn't that the name of his project?
Among others, but yeah.
The Ghost of Electricity, which I was telling.
I'm sorry, I'm going to go derail a little bit, but I'm just curious. Is there a lot of politics? I might be inferring a lot here, but like with Dead cover bands, like I have a buddy who's John Lennon in a Beatles cover band, and the politics and like, because there's various bands, but it's very much like what you're describing, like a person with the name, and they bring in different, Ringos and Johns and everything. And like, do you find that within this Dead cover band or post Grateful Dead music scene, there's a lot of politics in that area? You know what I mean? Like not like politics like ours versus these, but politics of like, getting in with certain bands and like other people that are trying to fill the position that you're filling. And
I don't know if I would necessarily call it politics as much as the simple fact of competition.
It's cutthroat.
I don't think it's particularly cutthroat. At least, let me put it this way. I don't think any of the cutthroat is out in the open. If there is any cutthroat going on, it's all done with a smile.
They're hippies.
But I don't think there's a whole lot of cutthroat either. I think what there is a little bit of, wow, there's one pork chop and there's 5 hungry people.
Right. There's 5 wolves coming around this.
It's like we're all looking to make a living. And I know when I'm not on the road, I mean, the truth is, I just as soon not be on the road much anymore. I'm 67 years old. I'm pushing 68, and I would just as soon work on developing more community at home and doing more exciting musical projects that I can stay at home and do, and I can record in my studio and get out and play. And I've given away for a lot of decades. I've given away a lot of familial connection, and
it's one of the trade-offs of being a touring musician.
Yeah, you miss a lot of friends' weddings and birthdays and funerals. And at my age, I'm a little bit like, well, you know what? I think I want those things.
Yeah, hell yeah. I completely get that. And I mean, I appreciate the people that have sacrificed and the sacrifice that you made to like give us touring music. But I these days too, with technology, there's a lot you can do without having to tour, right? There's a lot of creative endeavors you can go on, even, collaborating with musicians that are far away. You don't even have to do that, right? You can do all sorts of.
Well, even what we're doing here, the whole StreamYard thing, I mean, doing music via streaming.
Yeah.
It's a new medium, and you can actually, it's not a proven medium. Nobody really knows what they're doing with it yet, but the potential is certainly there. I think that the most difficult part with that and with anything in music these days, unfortunately, is figure out how to monetize it.
Right.
Right. There's this sense which somehow in a wonderful, magical world looks good on paper that music should all be free to everybody. But, I'm old school, brother. If I spend 30 grand making a record,
you got to make that back plus
why I should give it away.
Right. artists need to be compensated 100%. It's a hard market to figure out, I feel like right now, and cracking how to fully monetize it. Especially since there's such big players that are taking such a big share of it, with like the Spotify's and the Apple Musics and like Amazon Music and stuff, takes such a huge portion of that business.
Well, that and then when you look at the fact that like Springsteen's most recent record, I mean, here's a guy that, you know, was selling 10, 20 million copies of his records. His recent record sold 45,000 copies.
What?
Not even half of 100,000.
Wait, how did it? What happened that made it such a drop? What did I miss?
Nobody buys CDs anymore.
Yeah, nobody buys physical. Nobody buys physical.
Nobody buys physical music anymore. They just buy Spotify and listen to it on there. So for $10 a month, they get everything instead of buying a record for $15.
I didn't realize it was that severe though. That's wild.
Can you imagine what if the 70s were like now? Where would Led Zeppelin and the Eagles have been without all that money?
Nothing.
You know, the other thing is, and this is true too, is that the listening audience has changed a great deal. So, you know, back in the day, people were looking for the next big thing. What's the next wonderful new music to discover?
Goose.
And I keep hearing that. I need and the musicians, they weren't looking to be in tribute bands. They were looking to be the next Grateful Dead, the next Led Zeppelin. And nowadays, I hardly know any musicians unless they're in their 20s. I hardly know any musicians that want to be in a band doing original music and trying to break in and get people to love what they do. Everybody wants to be in a Dead cover band or a Fleetwood Mac cover band or a Tom Petty cover band or a, you know, whatever it is. You know, everybody wants to copy what's gone before them. And to me, that's really disappointing from an artistic, creative perspective, because how are you ever going to have the next thing that really captures a huge audience's fancy if people don't have an interest in exploring new music?
And people are hungry for it too. I feel like there's an appetite for it. It's just a lot of bands or musicians aren't taking that step. It's
not even that simple, because when I talk to the people that are booking clubs and the people that are actually booking the bands, the booking agents that are trying to get the band's work, what I hear across the board is that audiences are only coming. You can only guarantee audiences at two kinds of shows. One is the all-star review, where there's, you know, 4 or 5 names on stage and you know all the names, even if they don't normally play together. Maybe they don't even like each other.
Right, like the fantasy draft.
Names, you know, or the tribute act. You know, around here we've got Petty Theft and Fleetwood Mask and all this.
Right. We have a band around here called the Reagan Years, and they do all 80s covers, and they pack places.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've got Pop Rocks. We have Pop Rocks and a couple of other bands that are doing that too. That's very popular right now.
But so if you're an original band with original music, is it impossible to get booked, or is it just...
It's not impossible to get booked. It's impossible to make any money.
Right.
It's easier if you're a jam band, apparently, because you always see the jam bands hitting like the 8x10 here in the smaller places.
But you got to understand something. They're not making any money.
Right.
And they have the opportunity to play. Don't get me wrong. It's wonderful that we all have the opportunity to play. But prior to the current state of music, I was always able to make my entire living playing music. I never had to have a day job. That was something that you could do, and you could do it relatively easily as a young player.
Well, when you play like you play, I mean,
that's just not available anymore. You know, we would go into the bars and you would do, you know, 3 or 4 sets of whatever your favorite cover songs were. And that's how you learned how to play, you know. And then as you got better and better and better and started developing a little bit of a reputation, we'd form a new band. You know, I was in Spies. I was in whatever the other bands that I'd been in were, you know. And you'd develop your own little following, and you'd hope that you'd get a record deal. And then if you got your record deal, you'd hope that it sold and you could get out on tour. And, you know, it was a different time. It was a very, very different time.
Do you ever get to play for pure enjoyment?
Tea tree oil and coconut, that GCX crap.
That's awesome, Kate.
There you go.
Thank you, Katie.
Sorry, what were you guys saying? I couldn't resist that.
No, that's
good.
awesome. No, and maybe I don't know if this is an appropriate question or not, but like I feel like when you're a professional musician, you're in your position doing all these projects. Do you ever just get together with a group of guys or a group of friends and just play purely for the enjoyment of jamming or playing, or has it really become structured to what your project you're working on and the professional side of it?
It's not entirely what you just said, but sadly, one of the things that has happened through the years, and I can't even necessarily tell you why, because I know it's true that there are definitely musicians that are still just hanging and playing. There's no question about it. I don't find that I'm doing much of that. In fact, one of the things I've been thinking about doing lately is calling up some of the people that I've met locally that I haven't really spent much time with, except actively at a gig on stage, and saying, hey man, why don't 8 or 10 of us get together and have a potluck at the house?
Yeah,
your guitars, and who knows,
we'll just fucking jam a little bit.
That's
have a glass
fantastic.
of wine, jam for a little bit.
Exactly.
Don't even worry about putting the interface on or the tape deck or none of that shit. Just jamming for that moment,
sit on the
having
porch,
a drink.
But then you hit something and you're like, can we recreate that?
And you can't recreate it though. You record everything. This is what you do. That is the lesson.
It's so funny. My ex-wife, when I would, a lot of times I'll sit around the living room and, especially if I've just gotten a new guitar or a new pedal or something like that, and I'll fire up an amp and start playing, and then some idea will start coming, and it'll be a fresh idea. And she was great because she would always recognize that was happening, and she'd go grab her iPhone. She wouldn't disturb me at all. She wouldn't interrupt me at all.
Doesn't want to fuck with the flow because you got to go in
grab
there.
the iPhone and hit the recorder.
Yes.
So that I'd remember the idea later.
That's fucking
great.
Brilliant. That is so cool.
Yeah.
Oh man, where were we on that?
Well, we had some questions from the chat. What was it different in 98 and 2000 with the other ones without Phil there?
Oh, a huge difference. A huge difference.
Hey, I'm gonna move you real quick.
Yes, I played quite a bit with Phil since Ratdog. The whole first year that Terrapin was open, I did every single ramble with him that was in the Great Room, and we did a ton of the shows in the bar and that stuff together. So yeah, I've played quite a bit with Phil post Ratdog, but not in recent years. The first year or two that Terrapin was open, we played together a lot, and I continued to play Terrapin, but not as much with Phil after that. But you guys, there was another part of that question. I'm sorry, in the little blurb.
Oh, the difference between 98 and 2000.
Oh, yeah. So huge difference. Huge difference. Because Phil, being the bottom of it all and playing in a completely non-traditional bassist's role, he almost never plays the one, and he almost never plays the root of the chord. Two things that you pretty much always expect every bass player to do. He don't do those things, and
does that affect the way you play with him?
Absolutely. It's a big piece of what creates that Grateful Dead thing that happens, so when he wasn't there and we had Alfonso Johnson, Alfonso's an amazing bass player. Weather Report, come on, but
Bobby in the Midnights.
Well,
but he played the root
notes. Didn't get the Grateful Dead thing, and I
Right.
never felt like the other ones 2000 gelled. And a big piece of why it didn't gel, no slack or no slag against Alfonso, because he's great. In fact, I think he's out right now with an updated version of Jazz is Dead with Kimmock and whatnot, and
which more fits what he does.
Killing it. But when it was the other ones with Alfonso on bass, there were moments, but it didn't. I just really never felt like it gelled the same way it did in 98. 98 was a kick in the pants, man. It was magical, and I could feel that the audience, to a large degree,
break it out like the 11. All those songs came back that you had never heard before. There was
exactly
something special.
And the big band, after Jerry died, I think a lot of people, because there was that 3 years, I guess, where there was nothing, a lot of people had assumed, oh, well, stick a fork in that. That's done. And
well,
then
the first fathers were like Ratdog and Hornsby's band and playing a drum.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about
but
some version of the Big Deal Band.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
definitely.
What was your favorite not big deal band? Like the lesser deal bands?
Ratdog, without a question.
Yeah.
And not just because it was my band, or not my band, but not just because I was in it, but because we had an advantage over a lot of the other post Grateful Dead bands that were sourced from the original guys, which was that Phil had a really cool idea that was uniquely his, which was every time they went out, there was a new band, a new lineup, new players. And that's really cool, and it keeps it interesting, and it keeps it fresh. And I respect that. But the difference is that with Ratdog, it was the same lineup year after year after year after year.
Became its own thing and its own
vibe. A real conversation and a real relationship ongoingly. And I think for me, that's what makes a band special, is you really get to know each other's ins and outs. You get telepathic. You start knowing each other's moves. You start being able to do things like, the jams become almost writing sessions. You're not
right, you're just sitting there talking, right? You're communicating directly, and it's more than just being able to understand the language that the other people are speaking or playing. It's understanding the innuendo of a certain gesture or movement, right? Like the intricacies of spoken language is the same intricacies in the jam language.
Did you guys have signals like Humphreys McGee? I know they have hand signals when they want to switch a key or a time signature.
Nobody could have missed Bobby directing traffic. and he had some very interesting hand signals. He developed his own hand language that, because there are traditional hand signals that they use in the Nashville scene and stuff like that. I don't think Bob was all that aware of those particular signals.
He had his own.
He had his own, and we had to learn what they were. Yeah.
That's fun. And so he was really taking the lead of all of that, right? Like the direction, the tone, and where things wanted. It was all where Bob was going with it.
Yeah, as much as Bobby's ever a leader, because I think one of, and I don't want to put words in the man's mouth, but I think one of his philosophies, maybe about life, not just music, is to allow it to happen.
Yeah.
Not to have a fucking death grip on it and try to control everything that's going on. He had a certain amount of vision, I'm sure. But I've never played in anything that offered me the kind of freedom that I was given in that band. He never once told me what to play. Never.
Wow.
The closest that ever happened was the first time I tried out for Ratdog. I actually wound up having to audition, even though I'd already been doing the other ones with him. They called me into audition, and I did. And they called me later, and they said, "I'm sorry you didn't get the gig. Bobby feels that you sound a little too much like Jerry."
That's an interesting note.
Which was very interesting because, back then, unlike when they wound up working with Kadlezik, where they really loved the fact that he knew a lot of Jerry's moves.
Yeah.
Back in those days, it was like, play like you never heard Jerry Garcia.
How much was Jerry an influence on you prior to all this? Was he already kind of baked in? Was that one of your early influences?
Absolutely baked in, but like I've mentioned earlier, I hadn't actively listened to Grateful Dead music other than, once every year or two, I might pull out Skullfuck or Live Dead or Europe or Wake of the Flood or some of my favorite old records and go, oh yeah, I remember this. I loved this music. This is great music. But I hadn't actively listened to Grateful Dead music since my very early 20s.
That's probably a necessary part of doing what you did and stepping in that way, is kind of have a somewhat of a separation from it. I feel like if somebody was full fanboy through the whole career,
because like I say, JK came into it and, he's certainly extremely well studied and, had all the rigs from the various eras, the equipment and the guitars and he, he could play a St. Stephen from the 60s and then he could play
an estimated from 77 or something.
Yeah, but I'm talking about like he knew the different approaches to the same song
Right.
in different
Right,
years.
like how St.
All right.
Stephen in like 88 versus like 74, what the differences were.
Yeah,
I know guys
I
like that. It's fucking
Right.
crazy.
I didn't know that stuff at all.
I get some of that, not exactly that, but John Mayer, like when he does Estimated, he does the Mutron. It sounds like the album, though. It sounds like the track that's off the album. But I feel like he captures some of that with what he's doing. I know a lot of people are down on him and think it's a weird fit and all, but last summer,
if they're digging it, I'm all over it. I don't feel compelled to go see that band, but it's not because I have anything against them. It's just not, for whatever reason, and I can't really honestly give you a reason. It's just not something that compels me.
Did you catch any of the Fare Thee Well? Did that compel you? No.
No, I know this will get me hate mail from you guys. I'm not a Fish guy. Trey does not speak to me.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I feel like it's the ability to authentically identify what speaks to you and what doesn't is more important than you agreeing with me on what speaks to me, because I can relate to you in the fact that we both feel passionate about music. We might not be the exact same music, but just the act of being passionate about it is such a like tangible, relatable thing.
Well, and wouldn't it be fucking boring if we all liked the same thing and there was only this tiny selection of music?
Right.
It would be horrible. It'd be fucking terrible.
So what do you listen to when you're, just put on music for pleasure? Do you listen to any new bands that are coming out, like we were talking about earlier?
You got to define new. I mean, I like what's his name, Blake Mills. I like Blake Mills a lot, and that's a relatively newer act. But I got to admit, I'm old enough that that stuff that's pretty long ago still feels like yesterday to me. So, when we start talking about new bands, I'm like, oh, I like the Alabama Shakes. I like Wilco. Those bands have been around for a long time now,
I think
that's enlightening when you say Wilco or Alabama Shakes, because that's a definite mindset, and
I'm an Americana roots guy at my core. I listen to a lot of Ry Cooder, David Lindley, Tosh
and that was
Paul,
totally the Grateful Dead in those years, like from 70 to 74. I mean, that was Americana,
Yes,
they embraced the whole mythology.
Well, yeah, especially with Working Man's and American Beauty and that stuff. Yeah, exactly. It's funny because, we were talking about Robin earlier, and we were kind of the exact opposite of one another, because he got into the Dead. I got into the Dead pretty early. I got the first album, the Speed album,
right?
And I liked it just because it was the Grateful Dead, and there were a couple songs like Morning Dew and Viola Lee that were really bitching. But a lot of the hyper speed stuff, I was like, what the fuck? This isn't how they sound live. But then Live Dead came out, and I was like, holy fuck, yeah, that's it. That's the shit right there. I just had a complete brain fart. What were we just?
We were talking about Robin, how Robin got.
That happens to us all the time. Don't worry about it.
So Robin got on the bus in those early days, and he loved Anthem of the Sun, and he loved Oxo Moxoa, and I didn't like those records. I liked what they were doing live, but I didn't like what they were doing in the studio. And then when Working Man's and that stuff came out, Robin was like, ew, what's this country shit? And I was like, oh, I like this. This is kind of like The Band and Crosby, Stills and Nash and these other bands that I'm also listening to. And,
it's very interesting how psychedelic music, that's what it morphed into in America, was this country rock kind of thing.
Well, is it psychedelia morphing into that, or that morphing into psychedelia? Because I feel like it's more rooted in the country and bluegrass.
But no, I'm saying the bands, the whole scene, like turned to that all of a sudden.
Well, but yes and no, because I think it kind of did a fractal thing too. Like there was certainly a facet of it that went in that direction, but then there were the other psychedelic bands, and a lot of them didn't get the same kind of attention. But they went all the way off the fucking deep end.
Yeah.
Songs? What are those? We do excursions
your
for
set
20
list.
minutes, you know.
Well, that Miles Davis was into that. That Miles Davis at the
sure.
Fillmore, that each side's
Dude.
just a jam for 25 minutes.
Speaking of fractals and artists, the bands and artists that come off of Miles Davis and the influence that had on music is unfucking matched or unrivaled. Maybe Grateful Dead, actually. As we go through this interview, you hear about all these different things that fractaled off of that. But dude, Miles Davis and that impact on
he changed music 4 or 5 times. I mean, you know,
it's
there was
fucking
the Bop
insane,
and the
dude.
Sketches of Spain, the Electric.
There have been a few people that have done that, maybe not as often with as much regularity as Miles, but you know, people like Jimmy that just, you know, changed the face of the fucking
Jimmy's
planet because nobody had ever thought to turn the fucking amp up to 10 and go crazy.
You ever get to see him?
I did, yeah. The Hendrix at Berkeley record and DVD, I was there.
Oh no shit!
Fantastic.
What was the best concert you attended, or the one you look most favorable? I know it's funny because you said earlier you can't do your favorite.
That. We need top 5.
Give us just off the top of your head some of the most memorable shows you've seen in your life.
I can give you some. I can't give you one. I got to see Marley with the early Wailers at Berkeley.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
I saw Leon Russell at his peak when the Shelter People record and all that stuff were coming out.
Nice.
I saw Crosby and Nash when they were really at the peak of doing their duo thing. I saw Van Morrison when Moondance came out. And he was just releasing Moondance.
That is probably my favorite song of all time. I mean, I'm not like a huge like soft rock Van Morrison like stan, but I love that Van Morrison.
Did you play it at your wedding?
I did. And if you had asked me, that would be a trivia question. That would be my favorite song, more than a Fish song, more than a Dead song or Zeppelin or any of these other bands. I love all these other bands more, but that song I fucking love.
Well, and that whole album was such a world-changing record for me and a lot of other people. And you want to hear this? This is really a trip. That Van was actually the support act that night, not the headliner. Releasing the whole album of Moondance, you know, on the world for the first time, and the headliner that night,
who was it?
Was Joe Cocker and Mad Dogs and Englishmen.
Oh,
which I also fucking love. So
that was a great show.
God, can you imagine being there?
The genius, some of the genius of Bill Graham was that he put together those eclectic bills back then.
Oh, like, dude, I saw the Who when they were first introducing Tommy. And the support act on that bill was Woody Herman's Thundering Herd, a 25-piece jazz band.
Right. And you get exposed to something you'd never heard before.
Amazing.
It was great. You know, I mean, thanks to Bill Graham, I got to see Howlin' Wolf. I got to see James Cotton. I got to see Albert King, B.B. King, Freddie King. I mean, it's ridiculous.
All the kings.
Wise Kings.
They're all
last
there.
name and status wise.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's amazing.
It's funny about that Cocker and Morrison lineup because The Letter has since become one of my favorite songs. And I don't know why. Maybe it's like a very cliche, like, typical thing, but like those are two songs that are very personal and deeply connected. I feel deeply connected with, and I don't know. It's super.
Have you ever written a letter and mailed it?
My baby.
Me?
Dude,
Yeah.
My daughter's first song she knew how to sing was The Letter.
Nice.
Holy shit. All right.
I'm old, dude. I've done all that shit.
All right. So I think we're running up against it. We're up on the hour. Thank you so much, Mark. This was a really incredible episode. So grateful that you joined us.
Oh, thanks for asking me, you guys.
No, this is
everybody
fantastic.
watching, like, subscribe, do all that shit that we're supposed to ask you to do.
Well, Mark, do you have anything you want to pitch before we go?
Sure, I'll go out on a limb here. I know nobody buys CDs anymore, but you know, my first CD's out. It's still out and available in release, and I'm about to release finally my second CD. So, you know,
awesome.
Nice.
At least listen, and if you feel like it.
Right. Go over to the website and go over to you have a website for.
I do. The new record's not out yet, so it won't be on there, but the old one is.
Okay.
Right on, Funky Witch. Thanks.
She's gonna make it popular again.
We're
gonna buy your shampoo and your CD.
we're taking next week off because of Thanksgiving.
We are?
Yes, and then
All
the
right.
week after that, apparently we're going to have Where's Walfredo on.
Okay, that's the thing.
With his poster. This guy does it. It's a fish thing. He did a poster like Fine
Mark's
Waldo,
like, I don't give
but
a
it's
shit about your fish.
right.
thing.
He's like,
I'm
fish.
okay
You had
with
to
this,
ruin
just
it for me.
taste.
So look for that, and thank you guys. Everybody have a great Thanksgiving.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Right
Thanks,
on.
Kevin. That's a good exit. All right, I'll see you next time.